everyone! Welcome to the AnimChallenge critique. This month's theme is Star Wars, and the winner is Coogan Maruchu. My name is Samantha Youssef. I'm a character animator, director, and animation consultant in the feature film industry. So I'll be going through your work, Coogan. I'm really looking forward to it. You've got some great stuff here, so let's get started. So there's a lot of fun things going on here. You've got some really fun choreography. It's a really fun idea. I really love the cleverness of it. We set up this whole sequence. The choreography's got a nice rhythm and tempo to it. And then you've got that fun little trick that you do with the camera where we get to change perspectives and then have the reveal of the character coming back into shot and finishing up the fight sequence. So really, really fun idea. I really love it. So something that I really like here as well is you've got a really nice rhythm and flow to the choreography. It's a really fun fight piece. I think what you did in the time frame, it's not a very long time. We've only got X amount of seconds for this piece, and I think that you did something really fun, really entertaining, and you finished it. You told a story through the whole way. I mean, it is obviously, it's a fight sequence, but you start the engagement between the two characters. They're interacting. I really love the little surprise that you have at the end. You finish the whole thing. It's looking really fun. Again, like I said, I love the flow of the choreography. The tempo and the timing is really nice, really fun. It has a good feel to it. Nothing stutters when you're watching it. Nothing feels held too long or moves too fast. It just has a really, really good rhythm and flow. That's something I always really appreciate, that I really like in seeing choreography pieces. Just the way that you use the camera overall as a storytelling tool, I think was really, really fun. I thought that was clever, really inventive, really, really gives you an opportunity to do some fun stuff with the animation as well. So I think that was a fantastic use of the camera and use of those tools. You've also got a really stylized use of animation, and that's always the trick, getting that balance between body mechanics and real physical timing versus stylized animation timing. And it's always going to be a balancing act between the two. When we're going super stylized, oftentimes I find that we have to move away a little bit from the rigidity of what happens in the physical world, and we have to make the body mechanics conform a bit to the stylization of the animation. And when we're doing stuff that needs to be a bit more realistic, so to speak, we have to find the animation tools and make them conform to the regulations of physics and body mechanics. So again, depending on what end of the spectrum you're working with, we have to find a nice balance between the two. And I found that you did do that with this piece, that there's some really fun stuff going on. So really great stuff. So here you're starting out the sequence. It's great. We've got the time to set up these two characters. Using the force. Nice jump. Nice choreography here. I really enjoy how you decided to choreograph this whole sequence. It's really interesting. Great use of the camera, following the lightsaber all the way up to this overhead reveal where we then get the character coming through and then finishing the whole sequence. So really, really clever use of the camera. I love what you did here as a storytelling tool. I think it's really great. Coming back to the camera and how we're using it, just be careful of how you frame your character. So again, I think the use of the camera is fantastic. I love how you used it as part of the animation. I love that you used it as a storytelling tool. I find that often now, especially when you see a lot of student work or I go through a lot of demo reels, people have a tendency to move the camera just for the sake of visual interest, that the reason behind moving the camera is just to keep it more interesting, to keep it dynamic, but it doesn't actually serve a purpose. And oftentimes I find that it's a very amateur and distracting thing to do. But I think what you did here is really fantastic. What you tried to do with the camera is use it to follow the animation and also as a storytelling element. As we jump all the way over here, and it really sells what he's doing with the lightsaber, that he's throwing this lightsaber. You pull the camera back, give us the opportunity to see this anticipation and the depth of space involved, and then we follow the lightsaber, This character deflects it. We follow the camera up here, and then we've got this fantastic entrance of the principal character coming back in and finishing the whole sequence. I love what you did with that there. So just a couple things that I would just say to tidy it up a little bit though, in regards to the camera. Try to be a little bit more mindful of how you're framing your characters. Oftentimes when we're working at our computer, watching videos on the internet, watching things on a screen, sometimes we don't realize how these characters are sitting in the frame. And I'm a bit biased because my background has always been feature animation. And initially I started off in hand-drawn animation where my career started. So we were always taught to have a very acute awareness of what something is going to look like on screen in the theater. Oftentimes when we see things like this, where the foot is standing on the base of the frame here. Imagine that you're in a theater on a big screen. That's basically almost out of your peripherals at that point. It's also an awkward tangent line, which is basically where the boundaries or edges of shapes and forms converge with each other. So in this case, we almost have the foot tangenting with the edge of the screen, and that really flattens out your space. That really breaks the believability of a sense of depth. It creates visual disturbance in a way. So what we want to do is, I would just consider having your character either a little higher in the shot where the feet could be placed here, just to give yourself a little bit more room. Even if the camera is low, even if we've got that bug's eye perspective, just don't have them standing on the edge of your frame. It's just like a little thing that it just helps keep things a little more visually clear. And this character as well is a little bit uncomfortably out of our main focal points. So a very generic thing is the rule of thirds. I mean, that's not exactly a third, but these areas here are what we would consider our visual hotspots. And again, if you imagine the scale of a screen in the theater, if something is way at the bottom here, it's really just out of our general peripheral range. It doesn't mean that it's wrong to have it there, and it doesn't mean that we don't want to get these great dynamic shots, but you want to think of keeping things within a comfortable and aesthetic compositional arrangement. So don't have your audience trying to look for where your characters are. You really want to be leading the eye. It's all about clarity and storytelling. And especially in a fast sequence, if your audience is looking for your characters down at the bottom, I find that these are things that end up adding another 5 to 6 frame delay because the brain's got to find them, the eye's got to find them, and then it catches up with what's happening. Whereas if the audience is ready to watch your animation, it's ready to see what happens, and you don't have that 5 frame delay or stutter. So again, we don't have to lose the dynamic composition that you have going on here, because I really think you've got this David and Goliath mythological thing. You've got this one character that's feeling very dominant in the shot, and then your Sith, and then you've got your Jedi character that at the beginning you're trying to create this story that they're more vulnerable. You've got this character dominating, and then you're going to switch the roles and have them winning in the end. And you do that, which I think is great here at the end. I really love that as you come to the end of this sequence, now the Jedi character is really dominating your shot here. They feel more powerful. So here you can see that they're the dominant character, and now they've become dominant in the shot, and you've changed the roles like that. So again, fantastic storytelling tool. Fantastic ideas. Don't change these ideas. I think this is something that's working really well, and you're using the camera in a really great way, which again, like I said, a lot of people don't really optimize how they should use a moving camera, and I think that you had some really good ideas for it. So I love this. I just think compositionally, we could just fix some of these shots. So like I said, with the other one, you just want to think of giving a little bit more breathing room to the base of your screen. I always like to think that this is an area that gets fuzzy in the screen. Like in the old days, we called this TV cutoff, or you can call it padding your frame, or whatever it is that you want to think about it. I don't generally like to have focal points of my characters in that spot, unless there's a really specific reason. In the case of your sequence, I don't really feel that there is, but again, you can take this or leave it, but I would counsel keeping your character up here, keeping him at this scale, but maybe we could just pull the camera back a little bit so that his feet would be a bit more up here. That this is where the ground was hitting him. And then that way you just get a little bit more breathing room. We do get a sense of the ground that he's standing on. So you've got your character here. And we just get his feet a little bit higher up. We see a bit more of the ground, and it allows us to see a little bit more of this fallen character in the foreground, just to get a little bit more of a sense of the ground plane and a sense of the space, so that we don't feel that we're floating between the floor or getting a weird angle on it. So again, compositionally, you can still keep this power dominant aspect of your shots, but just give them that room more to breathe. So I would just suggest that there. Just be careful of that, because it happens again a few times here as well. I think there's a couple moments, let's just find it, where I just feel that we're getting dangerously close to the bottom of the screen. So if we could just lift that foot just a little bit higher. Again, you could keep the rest of your composition the same, but just make sure that they're not stepping on the edge of the frame. Nothing flattens out our sequence more than having it look like the character standing on the edge of the image. So again, here too, with this foot here, if you just could fix some of that camera animation so that we're not getting that placement. It's a really nice sequence that you have designed, so I just feel like don't let this take away from what you've got going on here. So also looking at the composition in the sequence, like I said, we can lift these feet up. I don't think it's going to kill the narrative of your shot if you bring this character just a little bit more into the scene so that they're just a bit more visible. Again, it's really nice that you have this dynamic camera and all these elements leading to where that character is. The design of your set obviously helps to illustrate this, but I would just be a little bit more mindful about your composition. So looking at the animation, we've got a really fun choreography here. I really like what you have going on. This is nice. You've got a good sense of that motor base, that pull in the chest and drag and overlap that's happening in the body. I love how the character is starting to get a little bit more in control of himself, your Sith character, and gets that placement down on the ground of his foot and starts preparing to come into the fight. It's not too distracting because it also allows us to see what's happening with your Jedi character, who's jumping into shot and getting ready. So both of them, really nice anticipations, really nice entrance into this choreography. One thing that I would say though, is that if we look at the spacing, now your camera's moving, so sometimes it's hard to track spacing that way, but one way to look at it is to look at how your character is in relation to their background. Here, as I look at the Jedi character jumping, what we're getting is that the top of his jump, as he's slowing into that moment before gravity takes over, and he starts to fall like our bouncing ball. And I'm looking at the spacing. The spacing is slowing down just before he falls here. So you have a path where he's coming along like this. So he's coming along here, and these are the areas where he's slowing down. So he's slowing down here, and then he's falling. And I think you should just be mindful a little bit of your spacing in this area. So what we want to be mindful of is that he's slowing down here at the vertex of the parabola that we have. It's just our classic bouncing ball that he's slowing in, gravity will take over, and then he starts slowing out. So what we don't want is that he gets this, he's jumping, slowing in to this point where he's slowing in, and then he just puts his foot down and drops. It negates the effect of what you're doing. The hang time is going to happen here if he's doing that big jump and coming out of it. So you just want to make sure that your physics are working properly. He can't just stop here and put his foot down, because what's happening there is that he ends up floating down into that contact. And you have very stylized animation going on. So what we don't want is that the in-between areas become floaty, which is what's happening here. And to avoid that, it's really about keeping your in-betweens and your breakdowns close to your keys. So if you imagine that it's like adjusting curves in Photoshop or something, it's all of your mid-tone colors. We want to go towards a black or a white. We don't want a lot of range of grays in the middle. The gray is what's making things a bit more floaty. So when we look at something like this, in your case where he's jumping across and he's slowing down like this as he puts his foot down on the ground, this is the area that becomes floaty. Whereas if he's jumping across and he's slowing in to the top of this jump and then he starts to accelerate out of it, then we get a nice stretch when he's putting his foot down to contact right here. What we want from here is that from this position where his feet are bent, we would want to get a stronger stretch. I would even keep this hang time up here. And then he can go into this pose. But I think that you could get something a little bit smoother there. I'd rather see a little bit more hang time at the vertex of the parabola and then more compression into the squash. All right, I'm just going to start with your Jedi character. Here you've got a really nice silhouette. Lightsaber comes out. Silhouette's clear. Staging is clear. One thing that I would consider here is that we could actually push this pose just to make it stronger. Your camera lingers here for a long time. This pose is imprinted on the audience's mind. We can never do much with the rigs, but we really can do a lot with how we arrange the pose, how we build this pose. So just things to think about: symmetry in your pose, for example. When you think about the masses of the torso, the masses of the body, and how they're balanced over the two legs, right now you have a pose that is basically centered very evenly over where we see the legs. So we get the one foot it's true, this foot's a little bit further in front, this one's a little bit back, but we do have a very symmetrical arrangement here. The shoulders, everything's piled over this vertical, so it's not as dynamic as it could be. It's not as strong as it could be. So let's say we're looking at the same pose. We could bring his torso a little further down. We could even bring out, maybe you could even think about pushing out a bit more with that leg, bending this leg a little bit more, and really getting that torso to kind of twist over. And we could get this arm lifted a little bit higher. There's our lightsaber. And something that I always feel, and I'm going to mention this a few times, I think, in this critique, is I'm a big fan of telling people elbows up. That's something that I end up telling people a lot. It's kind of part of body mechanics awareness, depending on how active or athletic our characters are. When the elbows are down, it really does show a lack of strength in the torso. So again, you don't have to necessarily go with this pose, but I just want you to see how much more dynamic you could get this pose to be. Equally, it also gives you a little bit more of a squatting position that can help lead into your animation. That's another thing, is that your levels don't change a lot. So I want to talk to you a bit about that as well. But coming back to the elbow thing, because this is something that I will repeat as we go through other bits of your body mechanics and your choreography. When our arms are down, it implies a relaxation of a lot of the stabilizing elements that connect the arm to the torso. This happens because we let all of this collapse. You'll see it when you see boxers. I've had a lot of experience with martial arts and dance, and so I'm very conscious of that sensation of connecting my arms to my torso. It's almost like you're imagining pushing against a basketball or a soccer ball or something under your arm. It creates a stability in the arm, and it creates more power and connectivity in the pose. And it also allows for the arms to connect to the pose and create better lines of action, better flow. So it adds a lot more power and strength to the feeling of the pose. His arms, for me, it's very distracting when I see a collapsed elbow over here on this side. To see that elbow collapse, to me, makes the pose a bit weaker. So I definitely think that we could have that arm lifted. You can bring that torso forward. And then coming back to that symmetry that I was talking about, now you can see how the torso is balanced more over this leg. So even in how the pose is balanced, we have an asymmetry. The pose is balanced and properly weighted. The weight is placed well, it's grounded, but we do have a much more dynamic pose than a symmetrical pose, which is everything before. I mean, I'm exaggerating here, but is balanced a little bit more symmetrically. And so that does make it less visually interesting than having something pushed forward like this. So I would just say consider pushing your poses a little bit more. You can get a lot more out of them, especially this pose, because we're watching this pose and the camera is coming in on it. It would be nice to see it feel a bit more powerful and feel stronger. And again, you just also get a nicer silhouette. We've got nicer negative space here. The more that you can clearly stage a pose, the more that it's just adding to your story and reinforcing the story that you want to tell. Even though I have him leaning forward more, it can even allow you somewhere to go. If he's down here, and then here you can, I'm just following his hand. So you've got your character's hand placed kind of low. And then as the camera comes in closer, he's lifting his hand up. So instead of it just being that his body is frozen and the hand lifts up, it's actually, for me at least, I love that he could be, down really low. And then as his hand comes up, it also brings the body up a bit with it. And so it just gives you more performance opportunity than just having a mechanical hand independently lifting. So again, just things to think about. The more athletic your characters are, the more that every action that they do is engaging multiple muscles in their body, that they are very kinetically active, kinetically aware. Basically, the way that I like to think of it and the way that I teach it when I do these body mechanics workshops at studios is that the ideal with these kind of characters is that we're moving away from creating animation that is puppet-like. We're trying to remove ourselves from the puppet-like qualities of the rig and really bring in this organic and active life force into our characters. So everything that can connect, every opportunity that we can have to unify the pose and bring those things together is only going to make it stronger. Just something independent like this will feel more puppet-like, whereas if he's down here and his whole body is engaged in lifting his hand up and channeling the force, that he's going to throw at his opponent, I think that is going to tell a better story and also sell your animation, sell your body mechanics, and really sell the power in this shot. Because this whole shot, as much as you do have personality coming through a little bit with your characters, it really is a body mechanics sequence. It really is just about physicality and really nice choreography, precision of movement. So I think if you can get these things in it, it would really help. So we'll just keep going here. This is nice. I love this, that you were sure to get a nice clear silhouette so that the hand didn't tangent against the body. That's fantastic. If you could get to this pose by coming out of a stronger pose, I think it would really help sell this bit. So this is great. We're pulling this character. We've got that nice drag. I love that your Sith character is regaining control and anticipating into the movement to meet the Jedi character here. I think that's all fantastic. Like I was saying before, I love this choreography that you've done, and there's a really nice rhythm and tempo and feel to this sequence. It's really satisfying watching them fight, and the spin and the texture, the rhythm and the beat at which they collide and that everything is happening just feels really nice. It flows beautifully, but the poses themselves could be pushed further. And again, by pushing them further, it gives your animation somewhere more to go, and it's going to make it feel less floaty and a bit more dynamic. Let's just observe this arm right here. If we just look at the silhouette of that arm, we have it here, we have it here, we have it here, here, here. It's really not moving that much. That's all these frames. The camera's moving, but if we just really look at his arm, it's a lot of frames where it's really not doing anything in space. And it could be a little bit more dynamic. So just something here, since he's, instead of stopping him here, because we've got 2 frames where he's just held right here, you could act, and then here, so it's actually 3 frames that really his arm, lightsaber, and body are almost in the same place. Maybe 4 if we don't look at the angle of the lightsaber. So you've got him stuck here for a long time. You could actually give him more anticipation. You could get that pose right here. And maybe even give him a little bit more diagonal twist. You have a lot of verticals and horizontals in your poses, so it would be nice to offset that a little bit. You could get his arm, maybe even, say, we could get this arm up to anticipate, and we could really bring this shoulder across here. And again, get a nicer silhouette. Let's get that lightsaber away from his hand. So we could design a better silhouette, a better twist in this pose. And again, by giving him a little bit more of a range, you've got somewhere more to go, which means that each of your frames will keep moving instead of just being stuck in the same place. So I think that would really, really help bring more to this sequence. Just do a quick, I'll just do a quick sketch of him here, just so that we can see how that would translate. Get him kind of halfway between these 2 poses. And let's get that, maybe we get a little bit of that blur, you know, on that lightsaber. Start getting this arm to lift up. And as you can see here, how I'm drawing, again, sorry for the quick sketching, but I'm keeping your silhouette clean. I'm keeping that far arm away from the lightsaber too. You would just get a little bit more anticipation. And then again here, see how he's stuck in these 2 frames. I know that you're dragging it for impact, but we could go to this one here, so we really get that same slow out into a pop that you've got. Let's go to your breakdown. This arm, and we're bringing that lightsaber forward. Just want to get a nice feel for this. Let's really get that sense that that back leg is helping to push that movement through. Here's another thing. Just be careful of these in-between foot positions when you're doing these sequences. The foot's there like a little bit lifted off of the ground. Let's see if I zoom in a little bit here. Just be careful of that. Let's put that foot right on the ground, because as soon as he pushes those hips forward, his weight needs to be transferred. There shouldn't be any of this floaty in the middle shifting of feet. We really just want to push through. It's just more about getting rid of that gray that I was talking about, right? Let's really pop the power and the dynamic action that's happening here. So we shift the weight onto that foot. For him to have the power to resist the impact of this other character coming at him, he needs to have his feet planted on the ground. You want to make this pose feel as grounded and powerful as possible. So he's there coming through. Again, this arm doesn't need to come through at the same time. His left arm, the arm that's closer to camera, you're bringing the arm up in front of the lightsaber, but it's not holding on to the lightsaber. So there really isn't, he's not holding on to it. Nobody would actually put their arm there during a fight. It's just getting in the way. So I would also just say, just for clarity, keep that arm counterbalancing this action, because he's using the full force of his back and everything to bring up this other arm. So you're not going to be bringing both with you at the same time. He needs to counterbalance his weight. Even here, this arm will impact. And we have this line of action here. So we've got the lightsabers contacted, and you can bring that arm around, and you could even just think if you're coming through like this, maybe we would just see a bit of the hand here, a bit of foreshortening on that arm, and have it coming through. And again, you're just getting a cleaner silhouette. This way I can see a lot more what's happening in the arm and the body. And then now you could have this arm where you have it, it can catch up. Again, I just really want you to keep that foot down. Make sure that you're really looking at your reference footage or analyzing or feeling the action. Like, you don't have to necessarily be a martial artist, but try to think kinetically, try to think about actually what's happening, and pay attention to those things in your own body. And foot placement, ground contact, getting power from all of that is really important to selling that aspect of the body mechanics in your shot. And then again, you don't have to have the heel already lifted. It can just lift off the ground like that. We don't need it to float. None of this animation needs to be floaty. It really just needs to feel powerful and dynamic, and favoring the dynamic keys so that you really get those visual reads, especially since it's happening fast. We don't want the audience to float through everything. We want the audience to be imprinted with the powerful poses and move quickly between them. So don't worry about getting all of those, the linear in-betweens happening. I'll just come back to this now so that we can look at your Jedi character in this scene. Now here, he's pulling this character, and that's all looking really great. We've got the force going on. This is nice. His feet are planted. His weight is well over that foot. I love what's happening here. This is an aspect that I feel that you could improve a little bit on as well in this sequence, is your levels. So when we look at what's happening with your character, he's low. This is the height that he's at. And then now as he's going into his squash, he is dropping down lower, but I feel that we could bring him more so, especially when we look at where his hips are. Here are his hips, and his hips are over here. We can have him here. This pose I think is working really well, but here as he's coming down into the squash, I would probably say that these two are the shared squash positions. Your path of action is that you're going down this way, and then we want to carry this through this way and move him over there, right? So we want to have that really nice fluid path. So as he's coming through here, don't be afraid to let him dip lower. Don't be afraid to really get that body weight down. And let me just see where you want to. And if the leg is pivoting in, I'm just trying to make a decision right now as to whether or not I want the leg to bend out or the knee to bend in. Something I often try to avoid, sometimes it's not avoidable, especially in in-betweens, but when it comes to my key poses, I often try to avoid having joints pointing at the camera, because what ends up happening is that we get these stumpy things. We get the knee and the leg just become one stump. So if I can get this to bend just a little bit, it creates a better silhouette and a clearer sense of what's happening in this pose. So I want to drop him down. I feel like we could drop him a little bit more. We can just push what's happening here. And coming up, I can keep his arm where it is. That's all fine. So I just feel like we could get him down a little bit lower. And then likewise here, we can even have this leg and this come down a little bit lower. Just so that he's got somewhere to go. So that you're going from here down, down, and then it gives it's going to make this a bit more interesting. Now, this action where he's jumping across, we've got that path of action there. Just be careful too that your timing is working. That your spacing is working. I'm sorry, timing is working. It's the spacing I'm concerned about. Here, what ends up happening is he gets stuck. I'm just looking at him in relation to the background elements. He's getting stuck in this spot, and then he kind of floats down. So he's like jumping, and then he's drifting down. And I think it would look a lot more interesting to have him have that hang time at the vertex of the parabola, and then have a fast coming down and then sweeping into the action. It'll be a little bit more dynamic. And again, I'm trying to take away some of the linear and floating qualities that we're getting with the way that the in-betweens are spaced out. Here, if this is where he's coming down, we've got him coming, he contacts at frame 68, 69, and he's taking off at 58. About here should be his halfway. Let's just get this through here. Okay. So at about here, we want him actually here. That's his halfway across this arc. This point in the action, you know, like I was saying, don't be afraid to dip him down lower. Also, don't be afraid to compress him a bit more at the top of this jump so that we can get a bigger difference between the stretch that we have here and the compression or the squash up here. So at frame 63, he should be at the vertex of the parabola. And then he can start from here favoring out. So this is where his stretch is going to be. Even here, I think you could even keep this leg up a little bit higher just to feel a little bit more dynamic and have a stronger silhouette. Keep that elbow up. And then here we'd have, this would be our breakdown. So I'm going to get that leg up a little bit higher. Just watch the spacing on this sequence. Again, you'd want to do it not with the moving camera so that you can get everything right, but just make sure he's not going fast and then floating on his way down. I feel like I'd rather see him come down in a more dynamic way. And then even here too, as he pushes forward, I think what would be nice is that if you had him falling faster, he could come down and then strike up instead of everything feeling very horizontal. So we come down here, we can follow that path where he's falling. Again, let's bring him down a little bit more. Let's let him squash. And so his impact here, he can still be crossing lightsabers on this squash, but then this path he can now follow through as he moves up. So you just get a slightly nicer path, and make sure as he's moving forward that the power is coming from this back leg, because the front leg hasn't quite come down yet. So that's what's giving him the energy to push off. So let's get that elbow up. Another thing, just for body mechanics. Fine, let me just, actually I'll finish this one train of thought and then I'll go into the next thing with the arm. So here as he's coming forward again, let's get that foot down right away. There's no floating down of this foot. He's transferring his weight. He's pushing forward onto this foot. Weight comes onto this one, and that is giving him the power to bring this arm through. The other thing I wanted to just mention now is elbows up to engage more and to feel more engaged with the torso in the pose. But also don't forget that when you're fighting with a lightsaber or a sword or whatever you're fighting with, all of these weapons are meant to be an extension of the arm. They're meant to be a part of the person's body, that it moves with you. It's not an extra piece. You want to think that that sword or that lightsaber has to come right off of the arm. We want to move away from puppet-like things, and we want to keep strong organic connections and feel to this animation. So be careful also that we don't break wrists like this. The whole alignment of all of these forms has to carry right through. As you can see here, just the shape of how that arm goes into the hand and then flows into the blade, that's what we're looking for. We don't want a broken pose like this. And you can still have the same animation in terms of what we're seeing with the lightsaber, how it's swinging through. I'm still keeping it in the same place. I'm just fixing the alignment of the pose. So again, it's just body mechanics that we want to be aware of. So just be careful of that, because that's kind of happening here a little bit as well. We're starting to get a bit of a broken wrist. Here it's fine. I'm just gonna lift that elbow just a little bit more, just because it'll allow that wrist and that power to come through. This is all good. Foot's on the ground. Here it's okay if you want to take off some of the weight. I don't think you need to do it. You can just go, you could keep his foot grounded. You could have it pivot a little bit in perspective. This would be the angle that it's starting to pivot at. Just make sure the knee pivots in the same direction as the foot. So you could have it pivot getting ready to go into this pose. But I think actually coming into that, sorry, let's just watch this before I move on, because that's actually something I want to continue on with. Let's just watch this first sequence again. So we can dip him down lower, can get better spacing on this jump, and really push. I actually think I want this to come through. I'm just going to do a little sketch next to it, because the camera's moving, so it's hard for me to place the animation properly. As we watch it coming through, we just look at this sequence. He's going up, he's coming down, and then he's going up again to do this swing. What would be really nice is that he comes even further down, that we get that nice squash. So actually, in this pose, when he blocks that attack, it would probably even be better to have him continue to come down like that. So let's just see here. I'm going to take away these poses. So let's have him bring him down as he like blocks. I don't know, like as he blocks that attack. And then here too, we could have him, again, let's just bring that pose down. Let's get that arm up. Sorry for my crude scribbles. I'm kind of figuring this one out as I go along. You could really get his weight down. It'll give him somewhere to go to come up after. That from coming down here, here. The next step is now that he starts to go up. I'm just not drawing over that next sequence because the camera's moving and there's actually other things that I want to talk about there too. But just be aware of creating a little bit more levels in your work. Don't be afraid to squash the character further down and to give him more stretch, because these are athletic characters. He's not a robot. He's not a normal person. He's a Jedi. He's got the power and the strength in his movements to use the ground and really push off. I hope that makes sense. Before I keep drawing, something that I want to point out here is if we look at these poses again where he's about to turn, look at how right here in his body, nothing is really changing that much in his torso, like right from here, we have the shoulders moving, but in the hip area, there's not really much between these poses happening. And I feel there's just so much more that you could be doing with that. Again, we can keep the same choreography, but if you have him really coming down, let's say we have him really, let's really squash this down. Let's really get this, maybe his foot has to lift a little bit more here. Have that kind of foreshortened stuff. So let's bring him down a little bit more. Let's see here. So from here, the lightsaber is still coming back. I'm just thinking about how that line of action goes through that arm. You know, that's still dragging. He's still looking, you know, we do want to keep that sense of contact that he's looking at his opponent. This arm can counterbalance just like how you have it. Then here, as he starts to come up, we can really get a nice, this whole bit where he's spinning through. See when he should come down. He'd come down, we would definitely want him to be down by here. So by 79, we want him to be coming down into that pose. So between, basically between 73 and 79, I'm just working in the middle. So we'd say, let's say around 76-ish. This could be the height of the pose. So he could be up a little higher. And this is where maybe he'll lift a little bit off of his heel to pivot. He can still be in the same spot, but you could imagine that his belt is a little bit higher. Maybe we'll have, let's see what the foot's doing. When do I want to lift the foot? I don't want him to be on one foot when he's contacting the other lightsaber, because I want there to be that sense of power. But He is shifting. Sorry, I'm just trying to figure out the best way to place it. So I think it's 76. I might even just still have his foot maybe lingering. We've got the arm, and this is fine if you want to, that you're doing this backhand kind of thing. Just make sure that the line of action still stays strong through the arm. Just don't want to break the wrist. So we can still see the thumb here and the way that the hand can be going around, but we definitely want to have that sense that there's that connection through the arm. So that's going to be the highest part of this turn. So basically he's slowing out into that because there's our impact. And this is all going to be a slow out, that he's pushing out into that stretch. So then this would be I'm working halfway between these poses here. So make sure that he's always keeping eye contact towards his opponent. He's only going to start turning his head when he has to. So the head will turn last. Body's coming up. And here, this leg, is obviously pushing. The camera's moving. We're getting that push through that leg. He brings his arm around. So from here, shoulder first, arm dragging. Impact there. So again, keep his eyes on his target. He's not swinging blind. We have that impact. So as you can see here, I went way lower, and then now it gives him somewhere to go so that when he goes up, we're not stuck in all of those poses where his torso was exactly the same. So I think that's really going to help sell that animation. And then from here, he's going to come and compress down. So he needs to come down by this frame, by frame 80. And at this point, he can look away from his opponent, transferring that weight. Again, just watch your screen framing so that he's not walking on the screen. Elbows up, right? Let's get that arm, just again, it can still be dragging, but we can keep a little bit of negative space just so that we get, even just for aesthetic reasons, that we just get a better visual read on him. And then here, just don't let this happen where the wrist is breaking. When that arm comes through, it might mean we have to reposition where this arm is, but this is how he should be holding the lightsaber. It gives you a better silhouette, and again, it keeps power in the pose. So just be mindful of all of those poses. Here you have the wrist grabbing it. It's a much stronger pose. So just don't let it break. You can still keep, if you're worried about the spacing of the lightsaber and that blue light graphic following the right arcs, it's still going to do that. We're just making sure that this part of the arm feels stronger. So just be mindful of that. And then again, as he comes down, here as he's coming through, let him go really low, like maybe even lower. Let's just drop the hips. Let's drop this down. Let's get those hips lower. Let's get a nice lunge in his back leg, really strong. You could have his arm, maybe his fingers out a little bit like that, just so that it feels dynamic, but just get him to drop really low. And as he's shifting his weight through here, watch out for those symmetrical poses. We don't want him floating between. We really want clear weight shifts. So as he's coming through, he can drop his weight a little bit, dropping his hips over here, and he'll reach that leg out, right? Because he still wants to be in control, so he's keeping his weight over this foot. Let's just drop those hips a little bit. Let's keep that weight there. Here he's gonna, tentatively bring his foot forward. Let's keep those elbows up. Let's see, where was his arm here? Yeah, again, don't let the elbow lead through. It's like this whole force comes from his body and it comes from the hips. Just right here, let's keep that. You can still keep this here like this, but I would just keep this being your pose, that you're getting foreshortening in the lower arm on your screen, and not that the lower arm is in full view and that the foreshortening is happening in the upper arm. We want the opposite. Here he can be looking ever towards his opponent. This arm, and imagine kind of a line of action passing through the arms, because again, everything is connected. Here he can be balancing himself in preparation for the swing he's about to do. And to me, this almost feels like a better anticipation. You're keeping his weight back, and then again, it gives you somewhere to go. It gives you space. If you're anticipating on one side, it gives you more space to move, as opposed to being already in the middle and then just having to shift a little bit, which makes things floaty. So then from here, he can come through and just have it be a lot more dynamic. And even here, once he goes from here to transfer his weight, really make sure that from this pose, there's no halfway. He transfers the weight. You just bring that weight over. This leg is going to push him right over. And even if his body is still dragging a bit behind before it comes through here, that's what we want. The force comes from the hips, and then it carries its way through the torso, through the arm. So very much like you may have done in school, like a baseball pitch exercise, where it's really about the foot shifting weight, pushing through into the hips and carrying through and just transferring that energy through the throw. That's kind of what we're aiming for here. Just make sure, it's little things, but keep the elbows up. Just keep that feeling solid and strong. Keep it feeling connected to his core. This arm too, just let it counterbalance, because he just put all this energy through. There's his hand, let's say, or whatever. Let that counterbalance. Keep that power. He's not sleeping yet. The fight's not over, So don't let this get weak. Even here, he can bend that lower arm, but let this stay nice and strong, and keep a really nice silhouette following through in this hand. And then this arm, this one I'm straightening it out. That can come in, start coming through and catch up to where you're at. But even here as well, just watch that you're not getting that broken up arm. We really want to keep that power. If it means bringing this upper arm away from the body a little bit more, all of that is aligned without losing his energy, without losing his power. And again, here too, transfer the weight. He's bent over like this. Don't let him go to these floating halfway positions. It's one leg pushing to another leg. So as soon as he starts straightening up, if this leg here is able to move, it's because what's happening with this shift should be because this foot is pushing through the body. So we want that to start, we want to start feeling that it's actually doing that push and that it's helping to transfer that weight over here. So we're from here, and this should be bent. And then now we get that weight transfer. And it should continue to push that over, which means his hips could be pushed over a little bit more here. And then this would be, have a little less weight on it. I hope that makes sense, at least with what I'm saying. So just be careful of that, because that's happening a lot in this sequence. That, again, it's looking like, as a first pass, it's looking fantastic, but these are just little things that we could do to really plus this kind of a sequence. I've neglected our little Sith Lord here. Same thing happening here. He's getting all this power to do a swing, and then look at how he starts to crumble in on himself. And here, we just don't get that strength. So the sweep of the lightsaber looks really cool, really graphic, really fun, but this could all be executed in a stronger way. So here, as he's anticipating, I mean, this is great. He's lifting up. Let's see here. Just going to see what he's doing. I don't think I would have him float off the ground as you have him. I think if you do want him to push off the ground, give him a bit more of an anticipation. I'll just focus on that, and we'll move forward in your sequence. So here we've got this energy through the arm like this. That's all fine. Here, don't let that break. As he's going up, just be mindful of what's happening. So as he's coming up here, and you want these arms to come together. Actually, let me rethink this. Let's keep him powerful here. Personally, I think that you're distracting by having this hand come in front, because you're not even using it to help with the swing. You have, this hand touches the lightsaber here, but in every other part of this action, it's not actually in contact with it. So I feel like you need to make a decision. If you want him to be using both hands, make sure that that's happening. If you don't, then get it out of the way. But make sure that your storytelling and your body mechanics and your choreography are clear. Here, he's lifting up his arm. He's pivoting the lightsaber. And he's coming down. We're getting a little bit of lift. I don't think this floating that's happening here in his foot, I feel like we accept it because this sequence happens fast, that people aren't noticing it because they're looking at the lightsabers, you know, when we watch it play through. But I do feel that this could be done a little bit better. Make sure that you're not letting him float. I understand he wants to move his back foot in preparation to swing through. So what we want, again, is that sense that this leg here, this leg is pushing him up so that he can then release this leg here to put it over there. We're getting that push up. This you could even push, you could push this more. He could straighten this leg. So the shapes of his leg could look a little bit more like this. We could get all of his body moving in this direction. And this foot can now start to maybe release a little bit. Does he need this arm to be blocking his face? Personally, since you're not using it for the swing, I'm tempted to just keep it out of the way. Let's see his face. Let's see him looking at the opponent. And let's keep that arm here. Let's have him start to lift this up. And then now we're getting this back leg to reach and stretch. Now for that to happen, we need this foot to still be there on the ground. So I wouldn't bend that. I keep this one straight, allow him to reach this one up. He's really getting this height of energy, this kind of anticipation. Maybe even this arm can continue to lift to prepare for that wind up. So I'm trying to draw like your rig. Let's keep this silhouette nice and clean. Let's really see that arm through. Really get this lift in the torso. And so he's getting this big breath. And then to get that swing, we're using power from the ground. We're using our hips. So, I mean, I know they have the force, right? I know we have the power of the force behind us in this one, but we really do want this to feel credible. We want to feel that visceral quality of the fighting. And that's something that I love about what you've done, because you've just got such a great choreography. The way that they move around each other, this concept, it's just working so well. I enjoy watching it. I think it's super fun to watch. It's super engaging. The tempo is great. So I really want you to optimize like every visceral quality and every bit of texture and meatiness that we can get out of this. Just make sure that when this is here, as he starts to drop down, when he drops, it's also because we're shifting onto this foot. So now this foot can be on the ground and can start taking some of the weight. If this is his pelvic area, could start taking some weight away from this one. And it acts as a motor base, right? And starts pulling that torso with it. And this arm is up here holding that lightsaber. And I'm really trying to hold on to where you have your lightsaber animation. So this is coming down. You can be looking, we really want to see this relationship and this contact between these characters. And then here and here. Again, we've got to just keep dropping that weight, transferring that weight over, and letting this whole lightsaber start to swing through. That we're transferring the weight this way, and then this is going to come through. So, you know, again, like this can be here. This could be here. Elbows up. This is good. Like you've got them up. Let's keep that lightsaber maybe a little bit more silhouetted. Maybe the hand could be wherever you want it, somewhere like that. Because now that his hips are in place and his hips pulled him through, that swinging action is going to continue follow through. Here and you could even, again, don't be afraid to drop this torso down. Let's have this arm pulling that. This is where his hand is, pulling that lightsaber. I hope my scribbles are making sense. I'm trying to work fast because I want to go through your whole sequence. You know, that maybe this could be here and he could still be looking at this or something, but then you at least have somewhere that he went with that action, and then he can recover here. You know, again, the camera's moving, but then from this low point he can come up and just start. I mean, I'm kind of doing straight ahead here a little bit, but this foot can now start to come in, like that heel can lift up off the ground, and he can start, you know, as maybe his hand is coming through like how you have it, that the blade is dragging, and he's starting to recover up and follow through with what you have. But eventually he'll stand up. I don't think I would bend the wrist like what you have here. I think I'd want to keep that nice and strong, like as it holds this blade. It's just an option, but it just gives you somewhere more to go with that movement. I think I'm just not really a fan. This in between. Let's just get rid of that. You can find the right breakdown. As he follows through to here. And then this, actually, let's fix this. This, I'm going to lift his elbow because I actually want him holding the lightsaber more like this, because that's going to give him the anticipation to swing it the other way. So again, we just want to have, I hope these, I'm getting more and more scribbly. I hope that this helps make sense. From this pose, we can then swing through, and he went up. So then when you swing through, we want to bring him down and then back up. Coming through from here, let's keep him down. Make him angry because he's a bad guy. As he's holding onto this lightsaber. Have him come down and really shift that weight, right? So that we know like which foot is pushing against the other. And then this leg, because the weight is on this leg, it can now redirect itself. He can extend that leg and push back, which is what you're getting as he brings this through. And again, let's just get a nicer silhouette here. So he's holding this blade like this. Let's get that arm out a little bit more. And you could just get a much more powerful silhouette. And let that carry through. So this is where his arm is here. Again, just think about your silhouette. Think about staging and how this could read a little bit better to the audience if we just get that arm out of the way, you know, that it's counterbalancing. Again, pick the weight. If this leg is pushing this way, then make sure that this leg is counterbalancing and supporting him. Because again, we just don't want these symmetrical, equal distribution poses. Pick one side or the other, make one more dynamic than the other. And then the same thing here too, just don't break that wrist. Keep that elbow lifted. So it's a lot of the same, you know, these same concepts. I can just move this forward a little bit again. I hope this is helpful and makes sense. But just really, just to sum up, remember to think about your extreme areas, your extreme keys in the animation, the highs and the lows, and favoring those, moving faster between them so that it's not as muddy. And really push those poses. Don't be afraid to let them get down low and to go up a little bit higher. Give your animation somewhere to move. So then here as he carries through, just watch that spacing so that you get that nice acceleration, deceleration. Here he comes down, let him come down, let him go back up, let him spin around, let him come down, across. And just keep those poses feeling powerful. Here, as you finish this sequence, this pose on your sick guy right here, this is really nice. We've got the weight in the front. We have that push in the back leg. We have this nice extension here. We have a nice silhouette. We've got negative space happening in here. That's all looking really great. Here with your Jedi, just don't let him get weak. Now this arm won't flop behind him, it stays connected. So it means that probably you'd want to bring the lightsaber arm in a little bit closer. And here you might need to get that elbow placed a bit more like this. So that's where this would be. That here we're seeing a little bit more of his back. That's going to make that pose feel a little more powerful. And then again here as well, don't let that elbow squish in. Elbows out, right? We want power and connectivity to the torso. Let this hand come out here like this, and let this elbow start coming out, because then that's going to create a shape. We have nothing here. That's going to be like an ease in to the full reveal of this arm. And let's bring this arm out a little bit more. So you just get some nice progressive shape animation happening there. Or sorry, I see that you're bringing that arm straight. I'm going to keep it bent to get the lightsaber actually out of the way. So even here, I'm going to keep this a little bit more bent. We have this counterbalancing happening here. Let's just keep this up. So it's ready to go into that pose. Here, I'm going to, again, he's kind of having to balance. So I want what's happening on this side, I want him still balancing with this arm. So he's bringing that through like this. And then here, let's continue the arc of this elbow. Let's track it following through here. So there's his arm. We can see his head through the arm here. So we'll get like an interesting change happening. And then here, that arm can now come through. And I'd angle the hand differently so that the lightsaber is kind of on this sort of an angle. This leg is pushing through. And you've got that kick. Let's just make sure that kick is working. So we're anticipating that kick, contact, push, great. So again here, just don't let that elbow collapse. Elbows up. It's going to make your pose just feel that much stronger. And same thing as he's coming through here, even as he's recovering, if you keep the elbows up, you just keep the pose feeling a little bit more dynamic. Just elbow up this one. Like that's, let's say where his hand is. Keep that pose feeling a little stronger. And same thing here. So again, where we can just push this pose a little bit more. We've got this great kick. He comes out here. He's winding up. I still feel you can push your levels more. So as he comes out of the kick, think of this as a high level. And then here he can come back down so that even with this, he could even be a little bit lower as he's coming out of this pose. And then here, you could even be a little bit lower as he's putting his foot down or something. Like we could just get him lower to the ground. Keep that elbow up. And so then because he's low, now he can go from here, go back up. So here he would start moving up into this wind up. Again, just get a stronger silhouette. So that we just get that silhouette placement, keep that elbow up. Bend that knee a little bit more to just make a decision about like where that weight is. Get a nicer pose, nicer wind up, and then he comes out of it. Again, just make sure also think about diagonals in your shoulders. So think about how, as he, like this would be the angle on his shoulders. So here, maybe this could even be that this shoulder is higher and this one is a little bit lower, just so you get a little bit more visual interest. And then it gives it somewhere to go when he throws this here. Now, here with this character falling back, the only thing I would just say is we don't need to see the top of his head. I think you could still have him being a little bit more active. So, because this, when the head is so far down and then we come up like that, it starts feeling a little bit too over animated, I find. So let's still keep some of the performance aspects in mind, keep that head up. Here again, I want to feel like he's getting under control. I know he was just kicked in the stomach and that he's recovering, but he's still a fighter. So again, let's keep those elbows up, keep this pose feeling powerful. Here too, just keep him ready, that he's ready for action. And so now as he's anticipating this, just don't let those poses feel weak. Let him be looking ready for it, starting to anticipate it. Give his arm a little bit more power underneath it. And again, just don't let his torso not do anything. Give him somewhere to go. So in this wind up here, instead of it just being that the lightsaber is flicking, let's just make sure that we bring the rest of his body with it. And again, if you have his head looking up, we can get a little bit more of that. So it's like those other sequences where you have those moments where the character doesn't move. This way, we can really just keep him moving, keep him twisting. Don't let that power just come from his arm. Let it come from the whole body, all of his strength, muscle, action. Make this more powerful. So it's coming from here, the hips. So something like this even, that his hand is here, and his arm is already lifted, and his torso could be on more of a diagonal, right? And this back arm could be, again, like counterbalancing as he comes up ready to strike this. Make sure that the wrist, we want to get it dragging also. So we don't want this sense that the wrist is ahead of this way from the arm. We really want to feel that sense of the drag in its placement. There, he pulls through. Again, this is coming through all of the body and really pushing from that foot, like right through, all the way up. As he swings it up, keep thinking about your silhouette up here. Just really make sure that even with this arm, I would just lift it just for staging purposes with the camera, just so that we get a nicer silhouette with him. I love this. I love what you've done here. Having this other character coming through like this is fantastic. Really, really fun. Great stretch. Now here, because you've got this great streamlined, gorgeous animation, just watch your spacing, because what's happened here is that you've got the head here, then you have the head here, and then it pops all the way down here. It's like our bouncing ball, right? If the bouncing ball is falling, you've got, let's say you've got your stretch, and you've got the squash, and if it starts to slow down here, it's less impactful, right? We want to have that sense of acceleration and then compression. This breakdown, just be very careful of it, because here's our squash, and then he starts to anticipate. So if this is where the squash is, again, let's just make this silhouette a little clearer. Let's get this twist maybe in the arm a little bit more, just so you can see the silhouette of the lightsaber, and maybe even get this arm a little bit away from the torso, just so that we get, again, a clearer read on the silhouette. And just make sure, again, as he goes into that silhouette, here we've got our stretch. Make sure we don't get this pop. Make sure that this is like your breakdown that's halfway. So if your stretch is here, that breakdown should be here. So we've got our stretch. Just gonna sketch that in. So this one, we really want this coming down that arc. Again, maybe his shoulders are going to have to start turning here as we do this change of shape. So we want to bring that down there. So just watch that spacing. And then now that he's down here, now we're going to keep moving into that wind up, which is really fun. Again, just let him have a little bit more twist. Just think about the arrangement and the flow of things. Think about how we're trying to build up energy in this pose. So you know how you have this really nice line of action coming through here? Just think that that energy from the hips is also carrying through into this arm. So then that twist in the back also carries through into this arm. And so just how that arm is lifted and arranging itself to counterbalance and keep all this energy, it would be more here. So just be aware of all of that. And then again, with this wind up, don't lose your energy. Don't let the body crumple in on itself. Remember that it's not actually that the power is coming from here. The power for a swing like this comes from the hips. It's this leg that's going to push the hips that will then drag the torso with it to give it that power. That's what we want to feel a little bit in this, is that we need to feel that there is a push happening through that leg that shifts these hips over. And that's what's helping lift this torso, and then that shoulder is coming around. And again, keep that energy in the arm, keep that power in the shoulder as the arm is coming around. Don't let this arm just come in. It's going to still be balancing. And then here too, as he moves forward, we want to feel that this leg is actually starting to give us that energy. It's carrying through here. And again, we want to feel that that elbow is lifted, that it's really powerful and connected to the torso. So I'm going to lift that a little bit more. I'm going to have the hand a bit more here. So maybe it's going to trail the lightsaber a bit more like that. That's the other thing too, is think about your shape silhouette animation. As you can see, if I were to color this shape in, and then in the next frame, this shape is moving over like this. So in my next frame, I want to make sure that that shape is shifting over also. So here too, we really want to get that transfer, that now he's transferring his weight because he's pushed from that leg onto this leg. It's just like what we were doing earlier. It's always about all this weight transfer. He's transferring that weight over. This leg is now pushing that energy over. That's helping to lift that torso this way. The arm is really connected to the torso, right? So it's more the lower arm that we're bending here. This is where maybe his hand would be. And then you can carry through the action. Great finishing pose. I think the only thing I'd say is get just a little bit more lift in the chin so you can get a nicer silhouette in the negative space in that area. I think that could be a nice thing. And then here, I would just say, don't let his head drag so much so that we don't get that really over animated feel to it. Once he's gone through, because he can look up, like he's finished this move, eventually he can look up, or at least look up a little bit. Here, I would just bring it, you can still have it lowered. I know what you're trying to do in terms of the performance, but I think that we could still lift it a little bit more. And then he can recover exactly as you have him. And like I said earlier, just watch that your character's spacing isn't at the bottom of the screen. So I hope that this is helpful and it just gives you some ideas to think about. I hope my scribbly drawings are clear. Again, I think all of this stuff is really fun. It's just about, like I said, favoring those dynamic key poses and not being afraid to push them a little bit more. Think about your levels. Think about where can things be a little higher and where could things be a little bit lower. And then don't let those breakdowns and in-betweens drift between them. Transfer that weight, favor those poses, and really just think about your bouncing ball, especially when it's something fast like this. Think about that everything is about that acceleration, deceleration. So don't let the spacing of your in-betweens break up that nice deceleration or acceleration, because then you'll get into some kind of floaty timing. Or sorry, floaty, like the spacing will be floaty and therefore the timing will feel a little bit slow and floaty. Overall, with what you've got, I love the timing that you're doing. Like I said, I love this choreography sequence that you've done. So if you could just push those little things a bit more, I think it would really, really be amazing. It would just be a perfect fight sequence choreography. So yeah, just think about if those things help. Just think about those things. Overall, great work, Coogan. Keep animating, keep being passionate, keep having those great ideas. Thank you for letting me go through your work. Thank you, AnimChallenge, for inviting me to participate in this fantastic competition. And if anyone wants to check out more of what I do, you can check me out at www.studio-technique.com. Thanks so much and happy animating!